to be honest. We're probably live.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. This is the Oil Drop Podcast, episode number 30. My name is James. Today, I am joined by Adam, Sweet44722 on Reddit. And we have a special guest today, Andrew Berkshire. So Andrew Berkshire is a contributor on Sportsnet and RDS, and he is formerly managing editor at Habs Eyes on the Prize. I believe that's part of the Nation Network.
SB
right?
Nation.
Yeah, okay. So formerly managing editor over there, and you can find him on Twitter at Andrew Berkshire. And yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us here today, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, guys. Nice to meet you both.
You too?
Yes, nice to meet you, Andrew.
I was going to say, should we let them on the secret that you guys kind of know each other for a little bit?
Well, yeah, for those who don't know, Andrew and I, we're childhood friends going back to about the 5th grade, so there's a bit of history there. So he was nice enough to take time out of his schedule and join us here today. Mm-hmm. So first off here, I guess we'll just start with the end of Oilers training camp. Training camp sort of ended on a bit of a strange note. I mean, Yakupov was traded. There was the Versteeg thing that went down. But let's start off with the Yakupov trade. So generally speaking, were you guys happy with the trade, or were you just surprised maybe with the lack of return, or did you just want to turn the page and get a fresh start with everybody? Adam, I'll let you start off there with that.
I mean, was it really a surprise because it's been rumors for the last 2 years? Like, it's those things where you've heard rumors come every time there's a trade talk or every time there's a deadline, it's Yakupov's name. So, surprise, not really. Return, kind of not really. We'd always been heard he was valued a little higher than we expected, and turns out he wasn't. Not quite as low as some people, 7th round, just get rid of him. But at the same time, it seems kind of an odd time for a trade considering we hadn't signed Versteeg yet, and then he ended up bolting to the Flames, and then we lost Drake Caggiula, so we have almost no right wing depth anymore. We're at Eberle and then a bunch of maybes. So it's kind of and Yakupov wasn't a star, but he was reliable for offense if you put him with somebody, or like to an extent at least. But it was one of those weird times to trade somebody where it didn't really make sense due to death concerns, but it seems to have worked out in the first 2 games thus far. I don't know.
All right, Andrew, what are your some of your quick thoughts there on that?
Yeah, I was happy just for Yakupov because I think that he needed a fresh start. But I was a little bit surprised after the Hall trade that they would go and trade Yakupov. Like, obviously, he asked for a trade last year, and it kind of leaked out. But I thought that after they traded Hall, that they would give Yak like a legit shot in the top 6 to try to, save his career a little bit. But I guess they just ran out of patience and decided that it was best to move on. And that's probably best for Yakupov. I don't think it's the best move for the Oilers simply because, like, if you're going to trade a guy like Yak who has like some serious deficiencies in his game but can score, put him with Connor McDavid for the first 15 games and then trade him. Convince some GM that he can score 30 goals, and then you're going to get a lot more than a 3rd round pick or a conditional 3rd round pick.
Well, he's on pace for a 40-goal season.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I was like, obviously we knew that he was on the trading block, but I did think he was going to make the team and start off with the team on the right wing. As training camp rolled around, people were starting to have these rumblings, like, is he actually going to make the team because of A, Caggiula, and B, Puljujarvi. Caggiula played extremely well in camp. Puljujarvi was middling, but he's the shiny new toy. Mm-hmm. So, whether or not he could make the team over Yakupov, it's kind of... what Andrew said, it's not the best move for the Oilers in my opinion, but I think it was important just to get a fresh start basically for Yakupov and the Oilers, and I'm sure that he was happy to move on as well. So ultimately I want him to do well and I wish him well, but I just really wish that maybe we could have built up the value a little bit more and maybe have a useful player in an Oilers jersey instead. But
I think part of the issue I know with Yumi and Arun especially, and I don't know what Andrew thinks about it, but I think we definitely look at Yakupov's time in Edmonton as he wasn't necessarily always given a fair shot, especially in Dallas. He got wrecked. That was obvious. Yeah. But even if you look at new management, he played with McDavid for the first 7 games of the season when McDavid was healthy, and McDavid went down. Or was it 12 games in, something like that.
Yeah, about a dozen games. Yeah.
So and then he came back and I think maybe he got like 2 or 3 shifts with him, and then he was stuck with Letestu for the rest of the season. And it was just kind of one of those things where it seemed like Yak's time playing with Letestu was being counted as Yak's ability rather than Yak playing as a complementary player to McDavid or Nuge. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where he's going to play in St. Louis, but it seems like that he was. It seems like that he's going to do okay so far, at least.
Yeah, he seems like he's done well. I mean, he's not going to drive a line, but he should be like a good complementary trigger man, almost like a poor man's Brett Hull, almost. Like. He's better than what he showed in Edmonton. That's my thoughts anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you guys are right. The key word there is complementary player, and I think being drafted first overall, there were a little bit of unfair expectations for Yak.
Yeah.
And, he was expected to be a superstar, and he was never going to be that. He's just he's a little bit too one note. And that's not really a knock on him. It's just, he's a good offensive player, but he doesn't do much else. It's just the way he is, and you have to utilize the tools you have. You can't, fit square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I was just speaking of Puljujarvi. We talked about Puljujarvi making the roster. Was that the right move, or should he be in the AHL for a little bit?
Well, I think the easy answer is that he should have been in the AHL for a bit. I mean, he's never played the North American game. His English needs a lot of work. But the Versteeg thing kind of forced the Oilers' hand, I think, Versteeg and Caggiula. So ideally, Caggiula comes back and maybe slides in and takes a spot, but I really don't know. I'm not entirely comfortable with Puljujarvi being on the team right now, but there's literally no other options. So here we are, because Oilers.
Oh boy, Andrew?
I haven't really noticed him. I watched both the first 2 Oilers games of the season, and I know that he scored a goal, but outside of that, I haven't really noticed him on the ice much. I mean, maybe that's because Connor McDavid kind of drowns out everybody else because he's so damn impressive. But, I mean, for an 18-year-old to make a huge impact is fairly rare anyway, so maybe that's not as big of a knock on him, and he'll figure it out during the season. But he definitely doesn't draw the eye at this point.
So I was wondering, why it was in the way that we hadn't seen him very much. And I was looking at his ice time. So in the first Calgary game, he played 12:52, and in the second one, he played 7:26.
7 minutes.
7 minutes. So I don't.
Yeah,
it seems like one of those things where, well, he's on the roster, but why the hell is he on the roster if he's playing 7 minutes a night?
Yeah. He should be. Yeah.
Maybe it is one of those things where Caggiula's injured and Pitlick's injured, and as soon as they come back, they're going to take over one of his spots. So I think Pitlick can play both wings, if I remember correctly, but it just seems counterintuitive to have. I mean, I get the idea of sheltering him, but if he's being sheltered that hard, maybe he shouldn't be in the league.
Was he sheltered in Finland? I don't think so.
He wasn't, but if you're sheltered, it's maybe they're thinking of it as, okay, it's a resort right now. He's in the NHL because of injury issues, so we have to shelter him a little bit, but I don't know. It just seems that we have better options. Like, we could move someone up, we move Cassian in the lineup, so why not stick Lander on the 4th line? Lander's not great, but he's utilitarian.
You're thinking, too, this is the lineup while we have all these stupid injuries from training camp, Matt Hendricks, Eero Pakarinen, Caggiula, obviously, Pitlick,
Davidson.
Is he injured again now, too?
Isn't
Pitlick injured now again, too?
Yeah, he is. He's out, I think.
So, I think, assuming that we had a fully healthy lineup, Puljujarvi still wouldn't be there. It's just kind of forcing our hand into something that we're not really comfortable with. And he should probably be on the Condors on their first or second line. I don't even know what their depth chart is like, to be honest with you. But
I mean, it reminds me, I think, isn't Slepyshev injured too now, I think?
I'm not sure. I think he might be, but I just ultimately kind of lose track of all the injuries that the Oilers have every year.
Pathetic.
It's so kind of a joke. Yeah.
Oh, God. All right.
So moving on here to the Chris Versteeg thing.
It's
just more reaction than analysis. What do you make of that? I mean, we gave him a shot. We gave him PTO. According to management, the Oilers did offer him a contract, and at the 11th hour, he bolts to our number one rival, Calgary Flames, What do you guys figure? What's your reaction there, Andrew?
It's pretty funny to me because I don't cheer for either team. But I mean, something's got to be wrong for a guy like. Obviously, he failed his medical in I think it was Switzerland when he went over to play in Europe. Came over to Edmonton, and I'm guessing they were probably the only team to offer him a tryout, and they offer him a contract, and he decides to go to their division rival. I don't know that just to me that would worry me that a veteran guy would look at somebody who gave him a chance and kind of spit in their face a little bit. That tells me something's wrong with Edmonton in terms of their management structure or something that he doesn't like about the team.
Yeah, and combine the fact that they have a brand spanking new arena, which is like way better
Gorgeous.
than the Saddle Dome. It's unbelievable. I mean, and the Connor McDavid effect wasn't enough to bring him in. So I mean, what do you make of that? I don't know, Adam. What are your thoughts?
Well, I know. For when he went to Switzerland, his contract didn't work out because of insurance concerns. So what I'd read online is that I don't know if it's right or not, but I know that the European leagues have a much more strict policy in terms of surgery and insurance and injuries. So since he had major back surgery the year before, he wasn't eligible for the contract because he didn't pass the medical. When he came back, it is kind of that stab in the back, dick move kind of thing, but at the same time, it seems like the Flames offered him a spot next to Johnny Gaudreau, and that's why he might have taken it. Now, whether that's one of those things where like, okay, well, in retrospect, you could have got a hell of a lot more playing time because we just traded Yakupov, and now you have a place on the second or third line at worst. It is kind of like you hear Reigns of Cashmere playing in the background, you hear him getting stabbed and throat slit, but it's just like it's over dramatic, but it is kind of concerning that someone like that would do that. But at the same time, Christopher Stieg is going to look out for Christopher Stieg. And if the Flames are going to offer him more playing time with, Monahan and Gaudreau, then maybe he's going to take that over playing second line with Draisaitl. I don't know.
It's a tough one too. Like maybe he just decided that Calgary had a better shot this year, like on a 1-year contract to actually make the playoffs, which I think is like fairly consensus around the NHL that Calgary's a little bit better simply because of their strong defensive core. But then again, those first couple games were pretty hilarious to have Christopher Stieg choose the wrong team.
I'm surprised he didn't get booed more in Edmonton, to be honest.
Well, he doesn't have a history with the team per se. I mean, if he got booed, it would only be for a couple games. I mean, how many times has Edmonton been spurred over the years? It's not exactly a new thing.
That is true, yeah.
All right. And then one more thing here at the end of training camp. It wasn't at the very end. Backing up a little bit, Reinhardt, who Peter Chiarelli's first major trade, I think you could say, sent down to the minors, didn't make roster, and people anticipate that he's not the first call up because of Jordan Osterley down there. What do you guys make of this trade a year onwards? What do you anticipate from Reinhardt going forward? What do you think? What do you think, Adam?
I mean, I know you and I looked at it from the moment it happened. We're like, what the fuck is this? Like, a 16-33 for a guy who had shown nothing in the AHL and was 3 years removed from his draft years. It's concerning that the move was made, and it sure as hell doesn't look any better a year later. I mean, in fact, it looks even worse, I'd say, because at least back then we could say, oh, well, maybe he'll have a good year in the AHL and he'll come up in the NHL. And no, if he makes NHL, it's going to be as a 5'6" defenseman, and we already have a glut of those. And Davidson is better than he is. Nurse is better than he is already. He got passed by Chris Russell. He's not better than Sekera Larson or Fane or Clefbaum, certainly. You could argue he's not even better than Joe Norsley, and Osterley's been here forever and is half his size. Like it's just one of those things where Reinhardt seems destined to be a player that you look back on and go, okay, that was a failed experiment that we paid way too much on, and now Matthew Barzal's tearing up the NHL. But at the same time, maybe he turns it around. I don't know. They're like their family's like the anti-Stahl family. They have one player holding the entire family together. The rest of them are middling, middling players that won't make the NHL. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's where we've come to at this point. I don't know.
Andrew?
Yeah, that was a terrible trade. I remember when it happened, I was like, oh yeah, Griffin Reinhart. He was taken like 4th overall. He must be like all right. And then I like looked into it a little bit, and I was like, no, he's like a massive failure. And I talked to Islanders fans and analysts, and they were like, this guy is terrible. He's not an NHL player. And then you see who the Islanders picked with that pick, and you're like, okay, Barzal was like one of the big underrated guys in that draft. He's already making the NHL. He's already making an impact. Mm-hmm. It's just brutal. And I think like that kind of stuff, and you see it a little bit in like in with the Canadians too, is you can see like the symptoms of a bad GM in that like Reinhart was a top pick who had really failed at the NHL level, but he paid top dollar for him. And Yakupov was a top pick who had not quite really failed, but had not panned out to expectations, and they sold him for peanuts. And you see that kind of asset management from like really bad GMs. And, you know, like obviously Chiarelli won a cup, but the more things that he does in Edmonton, the more I'm like, yeah, that was pure dumb luck that he got a hot goaltender and happened to sign like the best free agent of all time in Zdeno Chara, and that's about it. You know, like he got super lucky there. And he's just continually proving that he's not that smart.
Yeah, the more time goes on, the more goodwill that Chiarelli wastes. You know, with the Hall trade and the Yakupov trade, and just things continue to pile up. And I'm like, this is not really working out. I'm getting more nervous about this as time goes by. But I mean, they're 2-0 to start this seaseason, so I mean, really, 82-0 is still pretty reasonable expectation. They're well on their way, so the McDavid effect, man.
Well, and see, that's the thing is that you wonder, we saw less anger this offseason, even when Larson was traded. Like, there was initial anger and it subsided relatively quickly versus comparing to moves like when Pronger was gone. Now, that's a little different context, but the city was, like, pissed for months. And it's one of those things where after 10 years of shit, the Oilers have finally got McDavid. And you got to wonder how long the McDavid effect is going to cover Chiarelli and his management's asses until we start winning. And if we don't start winning soon, when does the McDavid effect run out and then we look to somebody else? Because it's one of those curious things where he has, I think Chiarelli said he had a 5-year contract, right? I think he said a 5-year?
I can't remember, but personally, I give them like a 3-year window to really start showing progress.
I think if they don't make the playoffs by next year, there's going to be some serious contention about getting them out.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah, I think you can look at what happened with Crosby in Pittsburgh, and like I think the Penguins, the first year Crosby was in the NHL, were even worse than the Oilers last year with McDavid.
They were
and like,
yeah,
and a guy like McDavid, even if you have like not a great GM, he kind of changes things for your franchise just by like guys want to play with him. You know, it's like you might see some actual good free agent signings in the next couple of years as McDavid comes into his prime. Because like the fact that he's still 19 and he's probably going to lead the league in points this year is ridiculous. Like, and what he can do, like I thought it was hilarious. The first Oilers game after he scored on the not shootout, the penalty shot, and they panned up to Wayne Gretzky in the crowd, and he just had like this half smirk on his face, and he was like shaking his head, and you could tell he was like, I could not do that. It's like the talent level of the kids now is so extreme, just like the stick handling alone. And I think you're going to see some of that effect anyway, even if Chiarelli is not like the smartest guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can see that. I was just saying, now speaking of free agents, signed to be a free agent this year, both in stature and in pay and everything else along with it. How have you been impressed by Lucic in the preseason and regular season, James?
I haven't really noticed him, to be honest with you. I don't think he's played particularly well. I think that... Isn't he kind of infamous for slow starts, though? Like, he takes a little while to get his feet under him. So
he comes into camp out of shape a lot.
Yeah, like I can see that being a bit of an issue for sure. So I'm pretty confident that he has more than what he's shown so far. Like he hasn't been great. Let's be honest. He's got 2 assists in 2 games. You know, he's +2. He's not been brutal, but he needs to, you know, start imposing his will on games like he's capable of doing. He can be more. That's the short answer.
Yeah, Lucic is like this weird diametric player because he is both an extremely smart player, like he knows where to be on the ice. Like he's not a fast skater, but he finds himself in scoring position in time to play with fast players constantly. So like he knows the game. He is a student of the game as well. Like if you talk to him, he's really smart. And then if you get him angry, he turns into a complete moron who will ruin a game for your team. And like I've seen it, and it was like some of the most fun moments of covering the Canadiens for the last several years when he was a Boston Bruin, and it would be like a tie game in the third period, and he takes a 5-minute major because somebody like clipped him with a high stick by accident. So
Yeah.
you'll have that to look forward to for sure. He has like the biggest temper tantrums in the league, but he's a really good player. He can score like 50 points in an off year, like 20 goals, 30 assists isn't an unreasonable expectation for him.
Yeah,
That's what I'm hoping for, at least. Yeah.
And I don't know if his slow starts are a thing, but it seems kind of odd that you come in out of, like if you're out of shape, fine, but coming out of shape in a new team seems a little juvenile, I want to say, or unprofessional, I guess is a better way to put it. And it's one of those things where he's off to a slow start, but when he needs to start producing pretty quick if we want to have a chance, because Edmonton's notorious for slow starts as well, in the sense that we're out of the playoffs by the end of October or mid-November. Like last year was a little different with McDavid, but then McDavid went down. We scraped by for a couple months because the Pacific was god awful. But realistically, if we want a shot, Lucic has to start scoring and scoring a lot. Like he's missed 4 or 5 easy tap-in chances from McDavid so far this year, and it's just
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's switch gears a little bit here. So going from Edmonton over to Montreal, some Montreal-centered topics here. So my question is more for Andrew here directly. What are your personal expectations for the Canadiens this year? And then their rookie defenseman, Mikhail Sergachev. What do you think? Do you think he'll stick with the team or beyond the 9 games, or will he go back to the Windsor Spitfires?
I'll start with Sergachev. Originally, I thought that he was going to stick, and then they made him a healthy scratch in the second game. I personally would have scratched Emelin and kept Sergachev in just to like learn a little bit more, but I guess they just decided that they were going to keep him while Petrie was there. I wonder if they try to like stretch out his 9 games and like scratch him here, play him there to kind of game the system a little bit that way. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets sent back down now, unless there's a big injury on defense that he can fill in, because it doesn't make sense to sit him in the press box. Although I think that he can play in the NHL. He looked pretty good. Expectations for the team, I think they're going to make the playoffs, and it won't be that touch and go, provided Carey Price can recover from this mystery flu that's kept him out for like 9 days now. But overall, I don't think they're a cup contender or anything. I think that they have a lot of good pieces, but overall they weaken their team enough on defense, and their coach is so bad that they're kind of like an also-ran. They're like a what-if team instead of a contending team. So I expect them to go out in the first round, but I could see them going to the second round.
Okay. And what's your long-term opinion and analysis of the Subban and Weber trade now? Like, where do you stand on that now?
Absolute disaster from Montreal's perspective. I think it makes Nashville like an instant cup contender because they have like 4 of the best defensemen in the league now. Their top 4 is like unmatched, not even close. Weber, he's a good player when he decides to play the puck, but he doesn't like to touch the puck. And in today's game, you just can't play like that. In the defensive zone, he just kind of like sits near the net and tries to block shots, but he won't like put himself out there and try to win puck battles or like take the puck from someone. He just waits for it to come to him, and like maybe that cuts down on like the high danger shots a little bit, but the extra volume of shots just kills him in the end. And that's why like for the last 4 years he's actually been a negative goal differential player relative to team in Nashville. So that basically the Predators allowed more goals with him on the ice than off the ice.
Okay, so speaking of Shea Weber, let's talk about your articles that you wrote with Sportsnet here within the last couple of weeks. Your most recent one indicated that Weber was ranked, I believe, 47th in the league for defensemen. Can you take us through the process of writing those articles and the maybe some of the lashback that you've received from them, and yeah, just take us
Look at
through
you
those.
bringing in the good questions.
Yeah, so basically, I tried to include as many statistics that I could, either traditional statistics for like goals and assists, to Corsi, to Sport Logic data, which is the company that I do contract work for, and I believe the total number for defensemen was there was 39 different statistics in 3 different categories: offense, defense, and transition play. And each statistic had a specific weight to it. So, like for example, for defensemen, like primary assists was weighted like a 4 or something like that. So the person who had the most primary assists over the last 3 years got 4 points, and then the next person in line would have as a percentage how close they were to the top. So say that we're looking at primary assists per 60, and the top is 1 and the bottom is 0. So it's all a percentile basis. So if the next best player got 0.9 primary assists per 60, they would get 90% of the top person's score out of 4 points. And so apply that way throughout all the statistics to a final score, and Weber ranked 47th. And in terms of backlash, for most of it, it was pretty good. There was a lot of questions about the methodology that I was more than happy to answer. I got a little bit of backlash from Caps fans that Ovi ranked so low, but once I explained why exactly he was ranked so low, and that was all like based on his defensive play and what he has to do to score 50 goals, which is sacrifice defensively, they understood pretty well, and I actually thought that they were pretty good about it. But the backlash from Canadiens fans over Weber has been extreme, and I think part of the reason for that is a lot of people, in order to continue being fans of the team, have to tell themselves that they won that trade. And like when you look at PK Subban's impact over the last 6 years in Montreal, like this is a guy who has been more loved than any player since probably Guy Lafleur, more than Patrick Waugh, more than Carey Price. And there's a huge divide between English and French because the media is so much different on each side. And I think that this is something that I've tried to cover whenever I get a chance to. Media makes opinions. As much as people think that they have their own opinions on sports and whatever, who you read and what you watch has such a huge impact on what you think about the game unless you go out of your way to research it yourself. And, French media has a very different approach to covering hockey than English media does, and they never really liked Subban. So there's a lot of people in Montreal who believe that Subban is a defensive liability and a selfish player and all this, because they listen to people who say that over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter what you point out to them, that, PK Subban has a crazy impressive defensive impact. He's the best penalty-killing defenseman in the NHL the last 5 years. They just don't care because they've been told that he's a selfish player who makes individualistic plays that cost his team, even though that's not really true.
Is it... I don't want to necessarily bring this up, but is it fair to say that there's maybe some racial context in that at all? Because there was a lot of talk about it being, it's because PK Subban's black that he's seen this way, and then it's not really brought up in the media, but is that maybe a context behind all this? Is that not really played an effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think in today it's almost like people get more angry at you for bringing up something could be racist than actual racism, which is kind of sad. But of course there is. Like I don't think PK Subban gets called like a basketball player, a basketball personality if he's not black. Like there's a lot of subtextual racism in a lot of comments, and like I don't want to say that certain groups of media are necessarily racist, but there is like some stuff broiling beneath the surface that they wouldn't say about a white player, or informs their opinions in a certain way. Like he's constantly called like flashy and flamboyant and athletic instead of intelligent and cerebral on the ice, which I would say, like, if anything, PK Subban is like an instinctual cerebral player, like an incredible thinker of the game with the puck on his stick, but you never hear that. It's all about like, he's a great athlete, but his choices are bad. He can't think the game. And that's something that you see a lot in football, is that like a black quarterback will be called athletic instead of, like a good strategizer or anything like that.
The Michael Vick effect.
So, yeah, and there's a lot of dog whistle stuff that goes on, and it's kind of sad. I hope that he gets a better ride in Nashville. So far, it seems like people love him there. His first goal, the crowd cheered for 2 straight minutes. Like, that's crazy. Obviously, they love him down there. I hope that he can grow the game as well, because you see, like, some of the black players that have come into hockey. Like, obviously, there's Joe McGinley, but for some reason, people still think of him as white because he's, like, half. But Wayne Simmons is great. PK Subban's great. Seth Jones is a big deal as, like, the first African-American who was taken really high in the draft. I think that we'll see hockey change its demographic pretty significantly in the next generation, and that's a good thing, drawing from more sources.
Mm-hmm. I think if we look at Austin Matthews, he's half Mexican.
Absolutely, and Nazem Kadri is a Muslim. Neil Yakupov also a Muslim.
Yep.
There's a lot of changing demographic. Like, I remember growing up that Paul Correa was like different because he wasn't like really white. And now it's like, if there's a Paul Correa out there, nobody cares. It's not a big deal, and I think it's a good thing.
Well, Manny Malhotra, I think, was the first Indian player to play in the league, if I remember correctly. And the Indians have Jujhar Khaira, which I think is the first Indian player to play for the Oilers. So that's kind of nice. But, I'd have to agree. It's kind of moving in the right direction. There's Kevin Weeks, too. Forgot about Kevin Weeks.
Yeah, Kevin Weeks is awesome. And Kevin Weeks, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, like, he dealt with a lot of racism. And, like, for example, in Montreal, someone once threw a banana at him, which is, like, despicable.
That's pretty despicable.
Yeah.
It's really gross.
Well, I feel like the Subban brothers, too. Sorry. Anyway.
Anyway, I'm going to circle back here to the media thing with Andrew here. Making the transition from managing editor of Habs on the Habs Eyes on the Prize to Sportsnet in general. Have you found it difficult to maybe not be such a fan of one particular team now that you have to be impartial, I guess, more impartial than you had to be before? Like, how's that transition been for you?
I actually found it pretty easy, to be honest, because, like, I think when you're honest with people and you tell them, like, what your perspective is coming from, and then you try to just lay it on the line, they will take that and understand that while you're talking about a certain team, you may be biased, but at least you've admitted it so they know. And I think that a lot of media will say, like, oh, I'm not a fan, not a fan, not a fan. Everybody's a fan. Right. Like, whether it's of a player or a team, like Elliot Friedman is probably the least biased person on Sportsnet, but he will readily admit that he's a Blackhawks fan. I mean, when they won the Cup the other year, he brought champagne onto the set. Like, everybody is a fan of somebody. Like Nick Kyprios will say he's not a fan, but he is a Leafs fan through and through. And he'll cheer for the Rangers too. Like, everybody has a rooting interest, and I think it's more beneficial to just say what it is instead of pretending that you don't have one. And even people who don't necessarily have one, like beat guys, every beat guy who's covering a team wants that team to have success because they get to work longer and they get overtime. So, like, there's always a rooting interest, and you just got to be honest about it. I think the biggest change going from, like, managing editor to a little bit more mainstream is I had to do less work. It's like managing editor, you have to do everything from, like, choosing the bylines to the pictures to, like, creating social media stuff. And now it's like I write my articles and post them on Facebook and Twitter, and that's it.
That seems better.
Well, yes, and also you get paid a lot more.
Yeah, I guess. All right. So
I was going to say, how did Sportsnet approach you on that? Did they just message you one day saying we want to hire you, or?
No, actually, what happened was I worked for SB Nation, and I was doing that for, I think, 2.5 years. And then I did a TV interview about analytics with CTV Montreal. And it just so happened that the person that they were interviewing before me was Craig Bunton, who is the CEO of SportLogic. Mm-hmm. And that company was just kind of starting out. And he asked me to come in and consult with them about what kind of data they should be looking at in the upcoming season or whatever. And at that point, they weren't like, they wanted me to help them track data. And I was like, I'm not interested in tracking data. I find it really boring. And, like I'll fall asleep during a game if I have to track data. I like the writing part and like using the data. That's what I like. And he was like, okay, well, we don't have any need for that right now, but if we ever do, we'll come back to you. And then like 6 months later, in the middle of the summer, they decided that they were going to open up an editorial division of their company, and so they wanted me to be managing editor of that. Offered me extremely generous contract, and so I said yes. And then that originally it was posts on the Sportlogic website, but that morphed into part of Sportlogic's. I guess what they sell is broadcast contracts. So Sportsnet and RDS are allowed to use Sportlogic data on air, and they also paid for the right to use it digitally. So I'm part of the digital contract, most of it really. So Sportsnet and RDS pay Sportlogic for me to write for them, and that's the way that worked out. And the Sportsnet deal, it was actually like I'm the one who set it up. I like cold emailed Elliot Friedman, and I was like, Friedman, do you want to look at this data? And he was like, you want to be in Toronto next week? And I was like, sure. So we went and just did a meeting with Elliot Friedman and a bunch of different executives at Sportsnet, and they were like, yep, okay, we're interested. And that's how it got done.
It's awesome. Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, congrats. All right, so we're going to swing back around here to some general NHL talk, and then we'll start to look at wrapping it up after that. But let's start off here. The Austin Matthews debut, 4 goals in his first NHL game. I think they were saying that's the only time that it's been done in the modern era of the NHL. So with the Leafs going forward here, do you think that there's some actual genuine reason for optimism, or are they going to have to wait another year or two for things to really take off? Adam, what do you think?
I mean, I think that game is a prime example of where the Leafs are right now, where they had a ridiculous talent show up and blow the other team out of the water. Now, the Sens' defense was also god-awful in that game, so was the Leafs. The Sens were especially brutal. It's more of the fact that, so Matthews got 4 goals, obviously the Leafs managed to find a way to lose. And I think it's going to be that way for the next year or so until you see Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews and maybe even Garrett Sparks and Freddie Anderson get more comfortable. It's going to be kind of the proper rebuild format where last year was god-awful. They had a bunch of they came in and played some games, made some improvements, saw where they needed to improve, and then went on. And then they got the big guy. This year, they're going to play him a lot. He's going to improve a lot. He has a coach, Mike Babcock, he can trust. He has a management team that's going to get him what he wants, what he needs. And they're going to make improvements, but they're still going to be awful this year, so they're going to get another high pick. And they'll probably make some move for some more defensemen, for depth forwards. Next year, they're going to make a bigger step forward and maybe push for a playoff spot, and the following year, they'll be in the playoffs. So basically, this will be the last year of real pain, and then moving forward, it's going to be losing with making progress towards the end goal of the cup.
Okay, fair enough. Andrew, what are your thoughts on the Leafs?
I don't think there's going to be that much more pain, to be honest. I look at what they have set up through management and coaching and the players that they brought in. I think that now they have like a really solid top 3 with Riley, Gardner, and Zaitsev. I really like what they have at forward. As great as Matthews was, and like his second goal is probably going to be the goal of the year. Just incredible from start to finish. I thought Mitch Marner was even better. Like every time he touched the puck, it was this dynamic scoring chance play. And finally, he got one in the second game against the Bruins. But I think the Leafs they might not make the playoffs this year, but I think they're going to push and surprise a lot of people because, like even last year, they had almost zero talent with JVR gone for most of the season, and then Kadri had a great season, but he couldn't score. For whatever reason.
That shooting percentage was so bad for so long.
It was really painful. Like I felt really bad for the kid because he was dominating and just couldn't get it going. But even with that team that had very little talent, they were a positive Corsi team, score adjusted and everything. Like they were really decent. And now that they have some scoring talent, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And like we haven't even talked about William Nylander yet. He hasn't got his first goal this year. But he's going to be good. I really like Zach Hyman a lot. Like at this point, like guys like Nazem Kadri and JVR, who are very good players, are like you don't even talk about them.
They're going to be obsolete.
Yeah, and like if those guys end up being like your secondary scorers or even tertiary, that's impressive. I think the big question mark is Frederick Anderson.
Yeah. Yeah, goaltending could be a bit of an issue there, and I think that a lot of people saw that coming. He was great in Anaheim, but I feel like we've kind of seen that story before where a goalie is great somewhere and it doesn't really pan out.
I think I don't know how true this is, but I'm wondering what the data looks like from a goalie transitioning from teams from east to west or west to east. Because if you think about it, you play the same team 5 to 6 times in the Western Conference for a few years. You get to know players' shooting styles, you do all their homework, all that, and you play teams from the West twice a year, so you don't do that much homework. You don't look at shooter tendencies often. You look for the big players: Ovi, Malkin, Crosby, Tays, or Tays is in the Western Conference, sorry. Stamkos, Kucherov, you look for the big guys. And then when you switch conferences, all of a sudden you have all this data to process, all these new players, all these new shooters. You're playing them 5 times a year. You're not. I feel like the transition maybe is why some goalies, like we saw with Cam Talbot, we see with Freddie Anderson right now, where they maybe start off slow. And then as they build up their resume, as they get more matchups against players that they know, and then start seeing different shooting styles, different play styles, and different strategies even, because the conferences are very different strategies, then maybe they improve. So we saw Cam Talbot have a rough 2 months. I think Freddie Anderson will probably pick up around January again.
There's definitely something to that, but I think also with Freddie Anderson, what we need to be conscious of is that in Anaheim last year, he faced the fewest scoring chances against in the league. Like they were a very solid defensive team, and like I like what the start of Toronto's defense looks like, but they don't have anybody who's great defensively. Maybe Zaitsev can be that guy, but so far, like he's still adjusting to the North American game as well. So like they're a little bit porous defensively, especially off the rush. So what Anderson is facing is a lot tougher. Even if he did know the shooters, it'd be tougher to play for Toronto than it would be to play for Anaheim. And whereas Talbot, he was kind of used to the bad defense in New York, but Edmonton, it was like a different kind, so he had to get used to that. And I thought Talbot overall last season was really strong, and I think he could be a huge factor for the Oilers going forward.
Right. We actually have a question from G-Sarts asking, Andrew, did the Oilers get data from Sports Logic?
As an employee of Sportlogic, I can neither confirm or deny. All of our policies are that there is a confidentiality agreement, so can't necessarily answer that.
Right on. Okay, well, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit from Toronto to Winnipeg. I didn't put this in the list of topics, but I'm just gonna kind of spring it on you guys. Jacob Trouba, the situation has been kind of dragging on, the RFA contract situation. If you are Winnipeg management, what do you guys think you would do with him? Would you bite the bullet and give him the big contract he wants, or are you looking at a trade? Adam, why don't you start that one off?
That's a tough one. I mean, at some point, it becomes a situation where you have a young player, who is rather integral to your defense at times, but is still playing behind two bigger right-paying defensemen sitting in the press box. And even if you offer him a contract, he's going to say, no, fuck you, you've been sitting in the press box for a month. Like, it's kind of one of those things where, and it's also, as the longer he sits, the more his value depreciates, because people look at it as, okay, well, he's going to be tough to sign. Or maybe he's not going to sign somewhere when he gets there. But the other side to look at it, though, he's an RFA. He has literally no rights. They can hold him as long as they want, and even if his value depreciates, he's still a sought-after product that teams will want to push for. So it's one of those. I don't even know what Cheveldayoff is going to do, but it seems like he might try to sign. He's going to try to lowball him, obviously, and he already has if he hasn't signed a contract yet. But I think ultimately what we're running towards is Trouba being traded in about a month and a bit. Just more out of frustration than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, from my understanding of the situation, it's that Trouba wants, a top 4 role, and I think that like his play dictates that he should have that. It's not necessarily that he wants out of Winnipeg or that he doesn't want to play for that team. He wants like real responsibility, and probably the damage has been done by now, and his teammates are kind of pissed at him. But I mean, trade Tyler Myers, man. Like Tyler Myers is not very good, and if you're giving him more ice time than Trouba, you're making a mistake anyway.
Yeah.
So you can afford to lose a Tyler Myers trade, but you can't afford to lose a Jacob Trouba trade. And the problem is what they're looking for, which is like an equally talented left-handed defenseman. Teams don't want to trade that, so I don't know where they're gonna find a place for that trade to be. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like if say Anaheim was having just as much trouble with Hampus Lindholm, that would be an option. But I think then you'd have to go Jacob Trouba plus, and it seems like the Lindholm situation's almost resolved now.
With was it Raquel getting a cheap contract?
Yeah, it was a really good contract.
Well, actually, and so there's a couple questions I want to bring up here, but with Myers, does it seems like I don't know why they're playing him so much. Like maybe he is a 3-4 defenseman, but he's not better than Trouba. So it seems like you either play him on his off wing and play him with Trouba, or play him third pairing and then maybe trade him for more valuable or for less valuable assets and get picks back or something like that. But it just seems like a situation where they're playing him higher than he needs to be played, considering who else is on the team.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
No. And then the other thing I want to bring up is with the RFA contracts, where we saw we saw Raquel, and I'm blanking on a few others that signed RFAs. Kucherov. Goudreau, and even Goudreau, yeah. But, so we saw a lot of RFA contracts seemed low, like lower than expecting, signed recently. And is this kind of indicating that maybe, cause I know we heard from, I can't remember, was it Friedman or somebody that said that the agents and the contracts they're signing for young players are kind of the canary in the coal mine for lockout. So are we kind of seeing the RFA deals are so low, and then maybe that's going to be something that's going to play into the potential lockout in 2020, or is this kind of just a GMs are having a really good month kind of thing?
I think the problem with RFA contracts is that, like, obviously we know now that players peak a lot younger than people originally thought they did. Your peaks around like 21 to 25. So those are all RFA years. So right now, the way the NHL is structured, you can get underpaid during your best years and overpaid while you're not as good. And, the NHLPA is mostly guys on RFA contracts. So they don't want those RFA guys to be making big money, because when they're unrestricted free agents, they want their piece of the pie. And the bigger piece that the RFAs get, the smaller piece is available for the unrestricted free agents. So it's one of those situations where, as much as it's a union, they don't look out for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very selfish situation. So I don't know if that plays into the union pushing for a lockout or the NHL. Like there's no big issue anymore for there to justify a lockout, but that doesn't mean there won't be one anyway. And it's almost like you can schedule it like clockwork. But I think what a lot of people don't remember is that as much as everyone wants to blame Bettman or the NHLPA for how many lockouts there have been, the last CBA was extended twice. So we're not necessarily guaranteed to have a lockout when this CBA is like first available to be opened up.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. I've gone through enough lockouts in my lifetime, so.
Yeah, now that my job depends on it, I really, really hope so.
You'll turn into BuzzFeed of hockey otherwise, trying to write about how many waffles did Carey Price eat for breakfast this morning? Training topic.
HockeyBuzz.com contributor.
I mean, that's basically
right.
ESPN states, but
Yeah. So one more Edmonton centered topic here, and then we'll look at maybe wrapping up and getting in some final few things. But Wayne Gretzky returns to the Oilers as vice chairman of the Oilers Entertainment Group. What are your guys' opinions on this? According to what I've read, he actually will be involved with hockey-related decisions. So is this a good idea? Do you guys kind of want him to be more hands-off? Do you want him involved with the team at all? Adam, what are your thoughts there?
First thing that springs to mind is OBC, which is terrifying.
Yeah, probably.
But I don't know, because have we seen Gretzky in a management role for a team yet, for an NHL team? Because we saw him in a coaching role in Arizona, and that obviously went very well.
He was involved with the Olympics.
Yeah, and so is Nicholson at that point, right? So it's kind of one of those things where maybe he's here as much a figurehead and a mentor role as like player development, still technically hockey operations, but it is rather interesting that Gretzky may be a case of one of those superstars that know how to play but can't coach, know how to play and can't manage. Just because he's so cerebral in the game, he might. It's hard to think about how other players might think of the game too. Mm-hmm. And it is one of those things where like first we brought in Keith Gretzky, and you're like, okay, that's an interesting one because he didn't do particularly well in scouting or anything in Boston, and then now we bring in Wayne Gretzky, and it's like, okay, well, he didn't do particularly well in Arizona either as a coach, and yeah, he's the greatest player of all time, and he's the figure of the Oilers and forever will be, but it's one of those ones that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of hockey sense, but it makes a lot of business sense, and if he's in hockey operations, that's still a concerning thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's fair to assume that Gretzky might not be as bad as before because he's been away from the game for so long. You know, like to give him a chance at least. But just from watching the Oilers over the last, decade and a bit, I'd be concerned about the old boys club. Like how long has Kevin Lowe been involved, and McTavish has been in and out constantly, and like so much decision making has been from the 80s Oilers guys, and like a lot of those guys were behind Hockey Canada in 2006, and that was a disaster. And I wonder, like, if Gretzky is going to consult, I don't think it's a big deal. But if he's like a heavy decision maker, then that's worrying. And the other thing is, if Gretzky is terrible, can you fire him in Edmonton? Can you ever get rid of Wayne Gretzky in Edmonton and not be seen as the worst?
I mean, we've done it before.
Yeah, and does anybody look back at that and say, like, you know what, that was the right decision at the time?
we love Peter Pocklington. That was a good
what he was
move.
Doing. But like,
you can't get rid of Wayne Gretzky. I feel like no team could get rid of Wayne Gretzky though. When he left the Phoenix Coyotes at the time, he stepped down. He wasn't fired. So
well, do you think that it could be the case of them saying, Wayne, we need you to leave, but we don't want to get blown out of the water by the entire league?
Oh, that's totally what it was. Yeah.
So, mind you, they say that to the Oilers, and you see Gretzky leaving the Oilers, and you're like, well, obviously he's not going to leave, so he got fired. Like, yeah, it's just. It's like it's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Mind you, it was the same thing. It was similar when Kevin Lowe was hired because Kevin Lowe was such a good player for the Oilers, and we gotta keep him around. And then he fucked everything up, and it's just like, okay.
And isn't he still there?
He's still there. He's in a business management role. He's like vice president of business management or something like that.
He's just not involved with the Oilers, but he's there with the Oilers Entertainment Group.
I mean, he was on not H9. He was on the Sportsnet broadcast before the Oilers intro and at intermission, before Wayne and Messier were on. But it was Lowe and I think Lowe was the only one. He was basically representing OEG, him and Cates. And it's one of those things that's like, okay, well, I prefer Gretzky to be a spokesman for us, but I don't know if I'd rather like either of them making decisions about hockey ops.
Yeah, I think just looking around the league and the way things go, like former legends of teams, I think they should be hired as an ambassador only. Like not involved in hockey decisions. Like, Guy Lafleur is an employee of the Montreal Canadiens, but nobody listens to him. He's just there to like shake hands and sign shirts and be Guy Lafleur because he's crazy. Like he's a nutcase and nobody wants him to make decisions. Like that and I don't think Wayne Gretzky is crazy. I think Wayne Gretzky's pretty smart, and like if he's used in the right role, he probably has a lot of value to an organization. But I definitely would be very concerned about, like what you can do to stop his influence just because he is Wayne Gretzky in Edmonton, and there's so many old boys clubs stuff in Edmonton, like it's been a nonstop factor in their history.
James?
All right. No, I mean, my opinion is more or less the same. I mean, if I don't want him involved with hockey decisions, because you don't want to ever be mad at Wayne Gretzky.
That's true.
I would want him as an ambassador. Does he even live in Edmonton? Like, as part of this role? I really doubt it. Like, he's not going to be spending a lot of time here. He's still going to be living in Los Angeles or wherever he happens to live. It's weird. It's a bit of a head scratcher, but I'm okay with it as long as he keeps his fingers out of the hockey cake, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean,
as Edmontonians, sorry to take over your podcast a little bit, but as Edmontonians, the two of you, what did you guys think of Daryl Cates being pushed as like the savior of the Oilers after he like threatened to move them 3 times and bilked the taxpayers out of almost $1 billion to build Ice City or whatever it's called?
The Ice District.
I'll refer to James because I'm actually not living in Edmonton right now, but
Yeah, Daryl Cates is actually not super popular in Edmonton, but he's like a recluse. So you never see him. You don't really get the opportunity to hate him because you don't see him. Like, the guy shows up with his son at the draft every year, and that's like what you see of Daryl Cates. And if you're walking in the River Valley, you can see his house up on the bank, which is like, it's massive. Like, holy shit, his house is huge. But you don't see him out like at Safeway or anything like that. So no, I mean,
Yeah.
The arena is beautiful, and once the Ice District in general is done, it's going to be beautiful. It's just kind of like, I wish that we didn't have a gun held to our heads to get this done.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny when he did his interview with, I think it was John Shannon, and they were like, who inspires you? And he was like, myself.
oh god,
This guy's a nutcase.
it's so bad. Like it's one of those like 4th grade projects where he's like, "Who inspires you? Me." You're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like, geez.
At least say your dad or something, right? Like
Wayne Gretzky. Oh, fuck,
There you
man,
go.
Come on, so much better. Oh god, come on. Connor McDavid, for God's sakes. Like, come on.
Connor McDavid inspires me.
Yeah, say that again. But I don't know, like Cates is like, he reminds me of Melnick. I'm in Ottawa, so Melnick is the tool of Ottawa. He's such a cunt. He had the internal cap for so many years. He's wasting Carlson, blah 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 blah. But he also jacks up prices. He literally blackmailed the city into filling him a new rink because he had said that, you know what, if you don't move it, I will sell a team to a group that's not gonna keep the team here. Like, he was straight up. He's just like, I will move the team. And it's not like
Where would you do it to?
that's the thing. He doesn't give a shit. He's just going to sell it to a team that's going to take it somewhere else. And maybe Quebec City. Because it's one of those things where Cates said, yeah, you know, I might move the team to Seattle. And he went to Seattle. He's like, ah, fuck you guys. Look at me over here. And but it's one of those things where it's like, there was no market in Seattle. There had no rink yet. And so it's one of those things where it's like an empty threat versus Melnick saying, no, if you give them to these other guys, I won't let you use these. We'll keep them here, or I'll move the team somewhere else. And for those who don't know, the CTC is out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Ottawa, because they were expecting the Canada area to build up, and they built the rink, and they just put in the shopper area 2 years ago. And it's a nice shopping area, but it's out of the way. It's a 45-minute bus ride from downtown. Parking is a nightmare. It takes 35 minutes to drive there. It's not a good rink. The new one's more downtown, it's more central, but if he wasn't getting a deal, the Sens weren't staying. And it just seems like one of those things where the biggest fan of the owner is the owner themselves. And as much as they likely want the team to succeed, it's more for profit reasons than, yeah, I'd like a team that's good. And it's just, Cates is being billed as a savior of the city. It rubbed me the wrong way. But at the same time, who else would own the Oilers but Cates? Because there's not many billionaires in Edmonton.
No,
So
I don't see anyone else. Yeah, I remember when he bought the team, it was owned by
it's like a conglomerate, right?
yeah, like 34 guys owned the team before, and they bought them back in the late 90s when the team was being threatened to move. And when Cates bought it from them, he made them offer after offer, and eventually, like, it was like a hostile takeover. He like ripped the team away from this group of ownership that was there before, and he paid a lot of money. But I mean, it's like, you're here for the money. I feel like that's what I feel like. So it's hard for me to like Daryl Cates. It really is. Okay, and I'm just looking over the topics here, and I think that that's pretty much all that we got laid out here. Did you guys have any last topics or topics of discussion that you wanted to bring up at all?
Predictions for tonight?
Oh yeah, we're playing the Sabres tonight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're gonna smash him. Eichel's out, isn't he?
Eichel and Kane.
Eichel, Kane, and Okposo.
No,
so
Okposo's supposed
basically,
to be
like,
back tonight, apparently.
is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no, we're gonna smash him.
4-1.
Another 3-point night for McDavid.
Mind
Connor.
you, the only thing that scares me is I've watched Robin Leonard play a lot, and when he gets a lot of shots on him, he goes very much Jonathan Quick, where he's impossible to beat.
I don't know, I think he's
Easily
terrible.
Rattled though.
Yeah.
Isn't Lehner easily rattled?
Just like run him once and he'll try to murder 5
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
get-
he's got the worst temper. He is so uncontrollable like
He
that.
does, but if he gets a pile of shots on him and he's playing well, he'll fuck you up. He will. So
Oh,
basically, what Lucic has to do is go in and poke him once, and then he's screwed. So, that works. I don't know. I think it's gonna be 4-1 Oilers. I don't think the Sabres have much of a chance tonight.
Yeah, I'd go with Oilers as well.
That's it. Okay, we're gonna call it. I think we're out of topics. So once again, my name is James Paul-McCartney on Reddit, and then there's Adam Sweet 44722 on Reddit. Today we were joined by Andrew Berkshire, and you can find Andrew at Andrew Berkshire on Twitter. And you can find him as a regular contributor on Sportsnet as well. And I believe RDS does some translation work for you, so
They do.
they can find you there if they read French. So if you like the video, subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter. Talk to us
A couple
on
weeks.
Reddit. Yeah, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with some more bullshit. Once again, thanks for joining us. My name's James. All right, let's call it.
Bye.